I think the more we learn about the sexual response in all people, but especially in folks born with ovaries, the more we realize it's very complicated. And it is almost never just physical or just mental emotional. It's usually a lot of both.
That's part of our conversation on sex. And this is Roar. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Roar. This is Danielle Davies, and today we have a very special episode. Today's conversation is one a lot of women have privately. It happens in texts, in whispered conversations, and in late-night Google searches when we ask things like, is this normal? We're talking about sex, not in a clinical way, not in a performative way, but in a real, human, slightly awkward, sometimes funny way. Because for something that's such a huge part of our lives, a lot of us were taught that it was either private, taboo, or just supposed to magically work itself out. I'm really excited about the group joining me today because they each come at this conversation from a completely different but really complementary perspective, and they are all amazing women who have been on this podcast before. So we've got Caitlin Tivy, who's a physical therapist. She works extensively with pelvic floor concerns, helping women better understand what's actually happening in their bodies, especially when it comes to comfort, pain, tension, and function, and how to stop normalizing things that deserve real attention. She also consults with women's health startups. She brings a scientific lens to how products, education, and care actually meet women where they are. Alex Robboy is a sex therapist who genuinely wants people to have great sex, full stop. She works with individuals and couples around desire, communication, and confidence. And she's also known for bringing sex education into unexpected places, like bachelorette parties, with the goal of less shame, more information, and a lot more fun. And Lisa Kinsella is the founder of LUWI, the finer liner, created after her own real-life experiences navigating divorce, a history of breast cancer, limited contraception options, and the reality that women don't always have as much control as we're told we do. Her work sits at the intersection of health, design, safety, and agency. So yes, we're going to talk about things that can still feel a little mortifying to say out loud, especially for the non-sex professionals like me. Desire changes, awkward conversations, sex toys, and the fact that some of these things are now sold at CVS. But we're going to do it in a way that feels honest, I hope, grounded, and maybe even a little fun. I could be very red. Hopefully you're not looking at me the whole time and look at everybody else. Because if we can't talk about this here, where can we? Ladies, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
And also, I gave everybody the caveat that I would say you guys a lot because it's very New Jersey of me, and I've never done a panel on the podcast before, but I already started off with ladies, so we're in the right direction. Let's just start right with the most embarrassing. That way, for me, the most embarrassing for me, and it shouldn't be. That's the other part of it. Talking about sex toys still makes me feel a little bit mortified. I'm 51, and I explained to Lisa and Caitlin the other day, too, that my husband came home from the store recently, the CVS, to pick up a prescription and was like, do you know that there's sex toys like right in the aisle? So clearly something has shifted. And I'm going to start with Alex. Alex, why does fun sex still feel embarrassing for people like me?
That's a great question. I feel like there's a million different answers, but I think there's so much secrecy and shame around sex that it can be really hard to acknowledge the pleasurable aspects and why everybody's doing it. And, secrecy just shuts people down unless you're having an affair.
Oh, but everyone is doing it. Everyone is doing it. And apparently, added stimulation and support can actually make sex more comfortable. Caitlin, since you're working with the physical body a lot, or you do in your practice, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good point. And in a lot of the work that I do, there is an element of vibration in many sex toys, but also therapeutic tools that people are using to, like you said, make sex more comfortable. I should level set and say that this can apply to anybody, regardless of whether or not you're having penetrative sex. Some people have discomfort just with penetration, whether it's with a penis or a toy or something else. But other people have symptoms, problems with just touch and just any stimulation to the genitalia. But As you noted, Danielle, regardless of where someone's discomfort is, if they have it, vibration and stimulation can be really powerful tools to reduce pain. Without getting a little too nerdy about it, which I am prone to do, we have a number of different nerve receptors in our body, in the skin, in the muscles, and in all the tissues, and all the various different tissues. And some of them respond specifically to vibration impulses, actually. Some of them respond to pressure, some of them respond to temperature. Each different little nerve fiber is specialized. So the more different inputs we can get to those nerve fibers, the more interested those nerves become. The more the body goes, oh, hey, what's going on down there? So that's one reason why, for a lot of sex toys, for example, vibration is a component of it because it specifically talks to nerves that are involved in both arousal and in muscle relaxation. You've often may have heard like the phrase of, "Oh, honey, if it hurts, just have a glass of wine and relax. It's fine." That's my pet peeve. I absolutely hate that. But with every lie or myth, there's always a nugget of truth, right? And we know that if the body is tense or the muscles are tense, pain can result. So vibration and stimulation can help muscles relax too. So for folks who experience pain because of tightness, it can be a really powerful tool as well.
Okay. And honestly, just hearing the clinical side of it makes it feel more accessible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that's like, I'm like, ooh, that takes all of that pressure off. Lisa, for
totally.
you who've got, upcoming products that are going to be in these aisles, what shifted culturally when lube and vibrators moved into just mainstream stores? This used to be like taboo.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's been so exciting this period of time. I think I think it's very generational. I think, I interface a lot with these two groups. One, it's, my peers, perimenopausal, right? A lot of OBGYNs, they're serving perimenopausal women and, moms of teens, and then Gen Z. And the contrast between those two generations is really stark. And it's so fun to be surfing this wave of that shift, right? I mean, for us, largely, our foundations were really negative, right? Back then in, sex education, sophomore year in high school, or maybe it was seventh grade, in Chicago, we went to the Crown Center and learned how a baby was born. It was like really super awkward. And that messaging back then was condom on a banana. Otherwise, you women, you girls, you are going to ruin your lives. You're going to have a baby or a disease. And that was that. And it was negative. It was scary. It was shameful. And you didn't talk about it. And that is so very different from today. I think there have been a lot of shifts just in society over the past decade that have ushered in this ability for this new generation, Gen Z, which is very subjective, right? They are the star of their own shows, right? That is a natural, right? Their Instagram, it's all about selfie. It's all about them. And that's great. That is needed to be able to own your pleasure. And I think, femtech was first coined in, I think 2017,
2016.
2016. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it didn't really hit our consciousness until a few years later, right? I mean, what? Like, that was never a thing until 8 to 10 years ago. That's crazy. I think after that, we see, what was like really next after that. The Me Too, where women's voices, that came right after, I think, didn't that come right after? It really went viral right after Femtech came. And so for the first time, women's voices were big and heard. That was a big shift. And then we go into this dark period of COVID where everybody is focused on self-protection. And they're themselves. Oh my God, I gotta wash. I mean, hand washing was always a thing, but oh my gosh, that was so top of mind. And then we come out of that like advocacy and health awareness to Dobbs, right? Roe v. Wade in 2022. Like, oh my gosh, these are really big shifts. You add in this generation that's all about themselves. And I think that's what's so exciting. We are in this massive cultural shift where it is not awkward for them. It is, they're open. When I'm on campus with these kids, because that is our first go to market is on college campuses, they are so eager. There is nothing taboo. They have questions. They want to know. They're with their roommate, their boyfriend, their, just a classmate. They have no shame. They're open. They're excited. They're eager. And I love that. That's how it should be. I take a lot of my examples, from them and try and apply it to my own life with my kids and their peers, right?
Absolutely. Well, but that's the thing. And you guys are versed in this. This is the world that you are most comfortable in. Like you can have these conversations and then we see it from Gen Z. They're talking about it and that's awesome for the future. And Alex and I have talked about how I'm not going to bring them into it, but like even our kids are having these conversations as well. But for women who are maybe didn't grow up, Lisa, you talked about your sex education. And honestly, that is so far above what we got here in like rural outside of Ocean City, New Jersey. Like there was, I mean, it's a miracle that we've repopulated.
Yeah.
So Alex, when we talk about this kind of stuff, like how can women our age or of older generations who maybe didn't grow up with this, how can we explore curiosity without feeling like we have to become our daughters or without feeling like we have to be somebody that we're totally not? Like, we're not going to just put on, our new persona in the bedroom, maybe. How can we do it without feeling like we're still ourselves? I mean, with feeling like we're still ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I feel like there's a couple of things one needs to do, which is talking to your girlfriends about this, just getting practice using your voice in a very safe environment, because if you're experiencing this, probably all of your friends are experiencing something similar. The other is opening lines of communication with your partner and sharing what you're really feeling. Because the funny thing in relationships is they tend to mirror your same emotions, a different version of it. And they really know you in the bedroom and they have the same goal. They want to have fun just as much as you do.
I love that. And I love that you say it because it is supposed to be fun. You know what? I'm not even going to go there because I almost just went down like a whole rabbit hole of, is it supposed to be fun culturally? Like there's a whole movement of people who I always, think back. I hope none of my aunts or uncles mind that I'm just going to share this with you and then move on. But my grandparents are Irish Catholic and they had 8 kids. And apparently after the 5th kid, my grandmom had her body had enough. And the doctors were like, you should not have any more children, And so they went to their priest and they said, can we use birth control? And the priest said, no, you got to trust. And so thank goodness they did, because now I have my aunt Denise, my aunt Kathy, and my Uncle Steve. But it's really not funny. I mean, it's funny to me in retrospect, but it's not really funny at all. And we're going to just keep this a fun topic. And yes, sex is supposed to be fun and it is supposed to be enjoyable. Let's talk a little bit about questions women tend to keep to themselves, because Alex, you even mentioned, talking to your partner or talking to your friends, but sometimes there are questions that start with, is this normal? And people don't necessarily want to ask that of their friends, their partners, even themselves. Caitlin, you see a lot of physical stuff. What's a physical concern you hear a lot about women that are often surprised to learn that it's really common, that women are surprised to learn it's actually really common?
My gosh, I feel like almost everything that I see, I have this moment. The squeaking in the background are my animals. They make lots of noise and they wait until I'm on calls. Oh,
we
good.
don't hear
Okay.
any of that.
Okay, good. They like to wait until I'm on phone calls.
Of course.
So I think because clinically I deal with people who are coming in with problems, I'm going to see a lot of those things that people aren't willing to ask about their friends or ask their partner or talk to others about. So I'm a little biased. But I joke often that I talk about pee, poop, and sex for a living, which I do as a pelvic health physical therapist. And there are concerns spanning all of those areas that I think women and anybody who's born with a vagina ends up being told is normal or assume is normal. On the bladder side of things, especially for folks in midlife, people think that it's normal to pee their pants, to leak a little when they sneeze or cough, or they think it's a normal to become more constipated with time or age. And I bring those up even though we're talking about sex because the bladder and the bowels are very close to the vagina and the other sexual organs, right? So those symptoms are not normal, even though we've normalized them. Oftentimes, someone who has one of those problems also has some sexual dysfunction. I think, especially if we're thinking about folks in midlife, there's a myth that, well, you're just getting older, so sex isn't going to be as comfortable anymore. It's not going to be as fun. You're just going to have to do it for your partner. You're not going to enjoy it. And I think that that's a really harmful and dangerous myth on both the physical and the mental emotional side. A lot of folks in midlife deal with vaginal dryness, for example, especially as their hormones start shifting. But we have lots of tools and options to help address that now so that people don't have to just grin and bear it if they're having discomfort or friction or pain or bleeding after sex. So I can't even touch on all of the things that women come into my office saying, oh, I just thought this was normal. I thought this was part of getting older or part of XYZ condition that I have. And I think the biggest takeaway that I tell a lot of people is common does not equal normal. Yes, it's common. A lot of your girlfriends might be having this too. And I don't want you to feel alone because you're having vaginal dryness, for example. However, that doesn't mean you have to accept it. There's stuff we can do to help. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And actually, because I was looking at it as the lens of, we're not alone in these thoughts and feelings, but also we may not be alone, but we're all suffering something we don't have to be suffering with.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
thank you for pointing that out.
I think
Lisa,
it's a kind of a thing. Yeah, if I could jump in, I think what I see in these, my world is split between these two generations is that the older generation, right, they think they're supposed to know. They think that they're just supposed to know. And the reality is, for animals, sex is instinctual. It's natural. Like the male, the female fox goes into heat, and then the male fox senses it, and then that's natural and instinctual, and they know how to do it. It is not instinctual for humans. It is not a natural act. It is something that is learned. It is largely informed by society and culture and physiology. And all of these things change over time. We are not supposed to know. This is something that we learn through our life experiences and growth and through society around us. And so when you take that, and I think that's the mindset that the Gen Zs have. Oh, I don't know. I want to learn. I want to consume more info on this because I want to figure this out. And I think I see that as a big barrier. We're just supposed to know. Like, who says?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lisa, when you mentioned that too, it made me think of the exact opposite situation too, because you're straddling these two different generational windows. And I see the same thing as well in younger people who come in. And for example, pain with sex, especially penetrative sex, is pretty common in young women under the age of 30, for example. But they come in, they don't have the problem necessarily of thinking they're supposed to know, but they have the problem of thinking, I'm too young to have something wrong. Why am I broken? I'm only 25. So it happens on both sides, right? Younger and older.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what do you see in your practice regarding that people are supposed to know?
I think everybody's right on this one, that we are supposed to know. There's all this information on the internet. I mean, you could go to ChatGPT or some of the other sites and get a plethora of information. The problem is it doesn't really address always your particular situation. So it's like you have half the facts and then you make up all kinds of stories to go with it. And people really don't have the tools or the skills to have honest conversations, or they don't even know what the right questions are. And so if you're asking the wrong question, you're just in trouble.
Do you see this like playing out in a certain way over and over again? Just out of curiosity, like, is there a more common scenario when you say people don't know the questions to ask, or is it varied?
I feel like it's all over the board. It's like, you come back after pregnancy, maybe where you were dealing with infertility issues, and now you're trying to have sex and now it's painful. And you feel like there's something broken, and you have this vision that I should just be able to make it happen. Like everything's going well in my life. I've had the baby, and they're not realizing like they just went through a traumatic experience and they have to relearn their body. They have to go back to the basics, and they have to ask the 101 questions all over again. It's like sex is a natural instinct. It's a drive. But at every different stage, you need different skills to help you navigate.
Oh, okay. And Lisa, thinking about like systems and kind of where you are in that, from your perspective, do you see what's something you see women quietly figuring out on their own that suggests the system isn't always meeting them?
I think because sex today is like everywhere and maybe nowhere too, for at least for the older generation, it's more open. So there's a lot of comparing notes. And I think there's a guardedness with generations that didn't grow up like the Gen Zs. And so they're only comparing certain notes, like they're sharing certain things and feeling shame about maybe fully being honest. And I don't see that with the Gen Z. I mean, they're so open and not shaming themselves if they don't know, or if they have. At least that's what I'm seeing. And I'm not in the doctor's office like you are, Caitlin, or, I mean, I'm on campus. They're fully clothed and we're talking about this stuff. So I don't know if I get less or more. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't know if I've answered the question. I think our whole goal is to help change this narrative that safe, protective sex doesn't have to sacrifice feeling. And so that's our overarching belief. I mean, that is why this company exists, right? To bring products that provide this safety and this protection that also give way to the feels, all the feels, because it should be fun. It should feel good. And so within that context, I think that opens up a lot of paradigm shifts. That opens up people to say, oh, yeah, wow, I just kind of thought that. And well, what else did I just kind of think that is not how it should be? We get a lot of questions about porn, right? Porn is obviously teaching a very explicit, negatively prone to violence view. And I think we see Gen Z saying, wait, I'm not going to do that. Whereas other generations, well, maybe that's what it should be. Maybe I should do that. I don't want to do that, but maybe I should. And as we go through more education, I honestly think that the more the Gen Zs are educated, that will inform the rest of the generations. We've really spent a lot of our time there. One of our advisors is Justin Garcia at the Kinsey Institute, and he has shared that with everything in life, the older generations inform the younger, with the exception of sex and dating. It's the opposite. So to the degree that we can really help educate these Gen Zs and lean into what they're asking and how they're comparing notes and what images are and questions they have and thoughts they have about this, that's going to filter up. That's what we believe anyway. I don't know if you guys have a different thought.
What do you guys think about that? I have to say, just having teenage kids and, one that's 21, that's 17, there are certain things that filter up. And I will also add to what Justin said, and it's like technology is also filtering up. Like that's another one, but sometimes they go hand in hand because so much of what kids are hearing and exposed to is through technology and social media. And so I mean, I remember years ago being in Philadelphia, Alex, and we saw, oh God, there's a drug that unfortunately is just a terrible drug, but it has people bent over. And it was the first time I heard about this drug. And my daughter was there with her friend and they're like, oh yeah, it's blah, blah, blah. You don't know about this? Like it's all over TikTok. And I was like, I had absolutely no idea. And I'm like, and how do you know about it? But there are certain things that are going upwards. And I do think that that's a pretty accurate assessment of it. And you don't hear, by the way, let's go back to midlife for 1 second, because, one of the big differences, and I don't think you hear this, but maybe they're privately telling each other and we don't know. But Gen Zs, you don't hear them talk about I don't want this anymore, or I'm not in the mood. They're at like the beginning of their sexual lives. So they're not necessarily exhausted. They haven't necessarily gone through they haven't gone through perimenopause, but they've also not had the life experiences that kind of derail you or make you a little bit tired. I think if you ever saw the movie, oh my goodness, it's an old movie where Shoeless Joe Jackson basically is in the movie and he comes out of the woods, Field of Dreams. And somebody, Kevin Kinsella. Bacon. Thank you. And Kevin Bacon says, I'm not even a glimpse in his eye yet. Life hasn't worn him down yet. And it's true. I mean, as sad as that sounds, life just does wear you down. We take on more responsibilities. So there's a lot of women that I hear, and I don't hear this from the younger generation. So I don't think we're going to get this passed up. Hopefully not. But they'll say, I'm tired. I just don't want to do it. I don't have any interest in having sex. My libido is totally shot. From a body perspective, Caitlin, how often is not wanting to actually the body responding to discomfort or tension or pain?
That's a really good question. And I'm excited to hear Alex's thoughts on this too, because I think the more we learn about the sexual response in all people, but especially in folks born with ovaries, the more we realize it's very complicated. And it is almost never just physical or just mental, emotional. It's usually a lot of both, right? And this idea that we should have spontaneous desire to jump into bed with our partners is probably a false script that has been fed to us from, like Lisa was talking about, porn and social media and entertainment, et cetera. And that's a whole nother can of worms. That said, keeping in mind that sex and desire are multifaceted and come from body and motions and brain and energy levels, oftentimes, especially for my folks in midlife, there is a huge physical component that is, if not driving, at least contributing to that lack of desire. We know from a pain perspective, of course, that a lot of people do deal with what's called the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, or GSM. It used to be called vulvovaginal atrophy. You may have heard that term or seen that term. Basically, changes to the vagina. It gets drier. As estrogen declines, the tissues get a little less elastic. They don't stretch as well. They don't respond as well. They might not get as much blood flow as they used to. So very physical components there. Also physical components in other parts of your body. What if you just had a knee replacement? What if you have some back problems? Those things also affect sex too, right? Think about it. If the rest of your body doesn't feel good, how the heck are you to enjoy sex, right? And then there's also the top-down effect, we like to call it, of the changing hormones as well in midlife and how they impact energy and libido, for sure. As we enter the perimenopause window, testosterones and related hormones start to decline too. And those are a big contributor to interest in sex as well. So long answer to say, yeah, it happens a lot. Physical components play in, neurochemical components like neurotransmitters and hormones play in. And then, like you were talking about, life gets in the way as well. So I encourage people to give themselves a little bit of grace and patience, because you're going through a lot, my friend. It's a lot to deal with.
You know what? It's funny because when I spoke with Alex on a previous episode, she leaned toward this, so I'm going to turn the floor over to her in a second. But I think it's really funny that you just called it interested sex, because Because there's sex, there's also interested sex. Alex,
Yeah.
what do you suggest? Because I know what do you suggest?
Well, let me just start by saying everything that Caitlin just said, I 100% agree with, and I don't think I could have answered that any better than she did. I would just add that I've been very interested in the somatic experience of body work lately. And this whole idea that people often go into flight, fright, or freeze reactions. And so when you want to engage in good sex, you really need to bring a level of safety into the room so that your whole body can relax and be at its best. And I'm actually not talking about always the 100% like the hallmark kind of safety sex, but it's like your body needs to release enough so that you can be present in the experience. Because I do think good sex runs on energy, excitement, positive, negative, all of that. So again, I always come back to communication is the biggest piece, and your expectations. If you're expecting to have good sex, you're more likely to have good sex. If you are having the skills, meaning you've maximized your diet, you're in good nutritional health, you're eating, as women, you're eating enough protein, you're physically exercising, you're getting your blood flow naturally, your body's going to work better and it's going to work with you a little bit more easily.
Quick pause, because if you're listening to Roar, I have a feeling you're exactly the kind of person I write for. I send out a Substack newsletter where I go a little deeper, more personal stories, behind the scenes thoughts, and honestly, some of the things we don't always say out loud here. If you want to stay connected between episodes, you can find it at roarwithdanielledavies.substack.com. I'd love to have you there. And now, back to your regularly scheduled podcast. It's crazy to think about all these things that affect your mental state going into sex, or even physically, like from a knee replacement to your diet. But one more component about the safety. Lisa, how do you feel about that, especially coming from somebody who created, so LUWI's a liner, and sorry, I'm just jumping in and telling
Absolutely.
people, so LUWI's a liner, but part of the whole premise is that women have autonomy and, or that anyone who chooses to use the liner has autonomy, but that is also a part of feeling safe during sex.
Right. Absolutely. LUWI finer liner is the first pleasure-centered alternative to a condom that a woman could control. And I do think that's essential. That is, number one, you got to feel like you're going to be okay. How can we close this pleasure gap? And that is something that comes up with Gen Z. They want to be able to have an orgasm, women as much as men. How can they be set up for success when they're nervous and worried and he doesn't want to wear a condom and, oh gosh, that is not where we want to be. That's not where we need to be. So we've designed this product for how it ought to be, right? I don't know if relying on a guy to use something that doesn't feel good and was constricting and desensitizing was ever a good strategy, but hey, that's like all we have right now, really. So, but I would argue that Gen Zs, they have a lot on their plate. They are juggling way more than any Gen X did. I mean, when I was in high school and college, nobody remembered anything I said or did, right? These
True.
kids, I was so little informed about politics. It just didn't seem to impact me in any way.
Or the world.
Yes, geopolitical tectonic shifts. I had no notion. I mean, or very little anyway. And I think they juggle a lot. And single thing is captured forever. And so in some ways, I think it's harder for them. Mm-hmm. And if it's harder for them to carry all of this and to navigate all this, and yet they're still able to say, wait, I think I feel good doing this and I want to learn about this. I just applaud them so much for that. And And that is one of an aspect that really completely drives me. I want to be able to provide this solution to these kids to have one last thing to worry about. Another thing, because we're latex free, another thing that we're noticing is MCAS, multi-cell activation syndrome, is so off the charts today. That essentially is just, I don't know if it's
what is that? I'm so sorry.
Response that causes so many allergies. It's increasing allergies.
Thank you.
And so these kids they have more allergies than any other generation. Obviously, what's near and dear is that latex allergy. So we watch that a lot, and that we've got a market of a category of products that is latex only largely. And we've got this group that is supposed to be using them, and they're allergic to them. Or maybe not anaphylactic shock allergic, but irritation as a result of using them because of this MCAS that's increased. So, I mean, we all have our generational things that we're carrying, but I think that the Gen Z is carrying a lot too. And so,
you're totally right. And it's such a mom fail of mine to not acknowledge that. And sometimes my son will be like, I am doing more than you have ever. And I'm like, back off there, buddy. I pushed you out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I have done hard things, but you're absolutely right. And sometimes I think we need to kind of step back and think about that. But I do see, and I'm sorry, this isn't anything that I said we were going to talk about. So I bet you guys are fine. One of the things I've noticed is in the Gen Z world, is that they're so much more confident knowing or expressing themselves as who they are sexually, who their identity is sexually. So, obviously back in my day, or, I didn't even know until recently that the Stonewall riots happened really in, I think, the late 50s or 60s, but it's just within a stone's throw of my birth. So, when my mom and I talk about my godfather, who was a gay man, and how he was engaged to a woman 3 times in his life because he tried so hard to
be someone he wasn't.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And kind of exactly. And how much of a struggle that was versus, and my mom's like, oh, who's very much an advocate, but also 76 years old, is saying, oh, now you see gay couples, they're out and they're holding hands and they're all over the place. She's like, and your Uncle Bill, he never did that. I'm like, well, he could have been arrested, and now you see something different. So I feel like, kids now are so much but that's just one
more open for sure.
Identity.
Like I remember one time my son and I were watching a football game and he said, "What's in the closet?" Because there was a football player that had come out of the closet, or he was in the closet and then he came out open, he was gay. And they didn't even know, right? And we have family that's gay too. And my son's, and I said, well, that's because he couldn't share who he was. And he said, oh, did that happen to our family too? Our gay uncles. And I said, yeah, they had to struggle. He just couldn't believe that, right? Oh my gosh, how could someone just not be who they are and just be open with it? And so, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And now, there are so many more expressions of sexuality. There's and transsexuality, asexuality, bisexuality. I mean, I do feel like the younger generation is much more adaptable and much more open about that. And Alex, yes, I can see your hand. What were you going to say?
I think people are very knowledgeable and they have so much more information, but I actually think people's emotional skills are much more limited today than it was, partly because we had COVID with the entire world shutting down, where people simply interacted with others less frequently. And if you think people are turning to the internet to interact, it allows you to disconnect and have a little bit less empathy for the other person. So in some ways, people are much more alone, even though they're showing up. Yeah. And I think that's having a profound impact on sexual expression.
I want to double
Interesting.
down on that too, because I was just thinking that when Lisa was talking as well, that we have this weird dichotomy where Gen Z is, for example, is more knowledgeable, as Alex was saying, but there's also this comparison component, I think, that can kind of bite them in the butt. There's that expression that comparison is the thief of joy. And more than ever, I think the younger and younger generations are growing up on the internet. They're growing up on social media, and they're constantly comparing each other, themselves to one another, and thinking, "Oh, this is what my sex life should look like because that's what my friends are doing, or that's what my friends are performing." Is even more important. Is their life, the lives of younger generations now are more and more performative. And to Alex's point, how much of that is real, and how much of that is what they have learned to do to cope and compare themselves to others. So keeping that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. I see Gen Z, the kind of the age, maybe late, just getting out of college, where these kids are putting self-imposed social media limits
On
on their
themselves.
phones,
Good for
on
them.
themselves. Yeah. And so they understand this is not healthy for me.
Yeah.
And I think I think we're going to see more of that, right? In my cohorts with some of these other startup founders, there's a lot of technology that a parent can, buy a subscription for, to put on their kid's phone to help them have a more healthy relationship with social media or
Yeah.
with their screen. And I think that's only a good thing for these
Mm-hmm.
kids at 23, 20, 22, 23 years old to say, oh, I can't be on social today. I'm not going to do it. To really recognize that. I think,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, do you guys remember when the kids were all vaping?
Mm.
And now these kids in Europe, they're vaping, but they're not vaping as much here.
Yeah.
So it kind of was this phase that they went through, a generation went through, and then they came out the other side and said, like, I don't want to do this. I hope, and I feel like that's what's happening with social media, to be able to lessen, as you were saying, Alex, that comparative, the impact of comparing, and the impact on their mental state during that.
Yeah.
Well, and it brings me back to it's funny. You guys all have a different perspective. You all you all have a different level of expertise or a different area of expertise, but no matter how many times we talk about the physical aspect or the physical barriers, or the physical protection, it really seems to keep coming back to connection. Like, it's connection that's going to get you good sex. It's connection that's going to kind of keep our friendships going. It all really seems to come back to this. And one of the things you guys brought up earlier, Caitlin, I think you mentioned it, that it's not like porn. It's not like you're like, oh, honey, you're home. I've got the Julia Roberts like tie on. My husband would die anyway, because that's how foreign of a concept that is. But really, Alex, you talked to me about this in our other podcast episode before, about the idea of practicing connection and actually, where it doesn't necessarily have to be on a calendar where you've discussed it, but it does have to be in somebody's head. Like, okay, we're going to do this at this time, or can you talk a little bit about that and how that kind of helps not just the physical aspect, but keep the connection going?
Yes. So I think what you're referencing is this idea that I tell my couples, one person should internally know that they're going to have sex and put it into their calendar so that they've mapped the entire day. Like, the dishes are done. They've got no work to do. They don't tell their partner this, of course. So their partner just experiences them as being very attentive and very connected. And maybe it will lead to sex. Maybe it'll just lead to, helping your partner with their taxes, or doing some random task that they're asking of you. And if you're both doing this, it means that it's going to always feel spontaneous, and you're going to feel like the other person's really committed to you and invested and picking up on your mood and your energy.
I like that idea, because I feel like it's something like a very practical thing we can do to kind of just get the most out of our own lives, and I'm curious, Lisa, how you feel about that same thing, in terms of, I mean, obviously you've got something that enables protected sex
To
at
feel
a
good.
moment's notice. Yeah, it can be
Right.
at a
Yeah.
moment's notice, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, the education around it is what we're working on right now, right? The curriculum that is around bringing this to market later this year is we're developing that right now. And it's really exciting because just what you're saying, this connection, educating them on this connection and the ability to be vulnerable and how that can help them, in addition to this new line of products, make more decisions that and enjoy and honor versus guilt and regret and shame. And what we're seeing is a lot of these campuses are bringing third parties, sex educators on to their programming for freshman year, first semester, second semester. They're constantly doing this. They're outsourcing that and they're hiring these third parties. We know a lot of these third parties and we're working with them with this curriculum. And one of the things that we've shifted is there's a niche of this curriculum that is very funny based. It's humor based. These people are sex educators and comedians, right? And we love that because where can you be vulnerable and connected? When you're laughing, when you feel good, when it's joyous, right? Not this guilt and shame and this is going to happen to you if you, right? And so that's what's so important to us, bringing more of that joy to this education component so that they can be in that space of really receiving and the information and then associating it with connection and vulnerability and laughter. That I think is so important. We've all just come out. I mean, I know we can't just always blame COVID, but damn it, it is a big reason for a lot of shit, right?
Yeah.
And,
totally.
And so that was really hard, dark, sad, closed off. And I think we're seeing what's the Gen Alpha kids. A lot of my friends are educators, and these Gen Alpha kids, they are just really happy kids. And so bringing more of that to Gen Z and then Gen X. And so, I think is what we have to do. I mean, the path is through laughter, right?
I love this. I love that, like, the whole physical component of sex has come secondary to the connection and the laughter and the joy. And even like for the women and anybody, men, but since our listeners are women, but for people who are saying things like, I don't want to, I don't feel like it, I'm tired. What are ways you can bring joy back? Because a lot of it isn't that they don't want to, it's that they didn't give themselves kind of the freedom and flexibility to be like, hey, you know what? It's important that I have fun. Fun is important. Like, I always call my husband the fun captain, because if we didn't have him, I'd never go out on the boat. I'd never do anything fun. And I'm like, I have things to do. He's like, fun is important. And I think a lot of times as moms, you put the kids first, or as caregivers. So how do we come back and make that fun?
Yeah, that's so true. Women are wired to be selfless, right? We're wired to put others first. That's a hard thing to overcome.
Yeah. Alex, you were going to say something too.
Yeah, I love to really think about this as not just sex, but exercise. So it's this whole concept of not wanting to go to the gym, but knowing if you go to the gym, you'll feel better. Not wanting to have sex, but knowing if you have sex, you'll feel better. These are all physical activities. And the more physical you get, the more embodied you get, the more connected you get with your own emotions, your own feelings, the more alive you feel. And that's the whole point of life in my mind, is to be connected with yourself and to have the best health possible. And you've got to just get pushed sometimes to get out there and do it.
I think too.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I that's actually a really interesting point that Alex made. Is speaking as someone whose profession is very centered on exercise. It's not something I think I've ever thought of before, of like treating sex as a exercise or something to do. The other comment I was thinking when you asked that, Danielle, was I mentioned the term responsive desire earlier, and that was a term that I first learned when I was reading Emily Nagowski's book, Come As You Are, which I cannot recommend enough, especially to anybody with a vagina. Like she speaks to all genders, but she is definitely centered on folks with female anatomy and understanding that desire and sex are a lot broader than we think they are. And it's very easy, especially culturally, to think that P and B is the only thing. Penetration is it. That is sex. Check. You've done your sex, right? Like it's a lot more complex than that.
I'm sorry. It has been crossed off the list. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And like that, I know for myself is when Alex mentioned sex as exercise, I'm like, oh, for someone like me, I could see that becoming a to-do list item. Like that's how I am built. Not everybody is, but it could be. So reminding ourselves that sex is a really broad category, and sometimes cuddling is your form of sex, and that's okay. And sometimes just touching or kissing or making out like teenagers in the back of a car, like it doesn't have to look like a certain thing in order to be pleasurable and in order to be joyful. So keeping that in mind, and highly recommend Emily Nagowski's book for anybody that's dealing with challenges in this area. It's blew my mind.
Okay, real quick. If you're listening and thinking more women should be hearing conversations like this, the best way to support the show is just to follow or subscribe wherever you are. It really does help it reach more people. Thanks so much. Okay, back to the show. I'm laughing because, Alex, you're like, make it like going to the gym, and now I have to be like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. All I have to do is 10 minutes on the treadmill, because I basically will talk myself into the next step. But I'm like, if I can just get in the door, I have crossed some humongous hurdle. So, but how do we make that? How do we do that for sex without making it like a check off on your to-do list? Because I am totally looking at my to-do list already. And a lot of times I'm like,
Well, I think you need to be focused on the benefit, right? Pleasure is vital. This is a vital sign. This decreases cortisol. I'm sure Alex and Caitlin know way more about the clinical side of what the impact is of sex, but knowing that this is going to help you be a better you, it's going to bring the best version of you out that's possible, right? I think that knowing that, believing that is essential.
I like that. I like the idea of making it a better you. Because, another thing, by the way, I don't know how many of you on this call are going through this, but I've talked to this season, I've talked to several people who are working with like midlife in terms of kind of reclaiming your own sense of self, or saying no as a hard stop sentence. And I keep using the same example that my husband asked me to do something on New Year's Day 2 years ago. And normally I would have kind of buffered it. I would have been like, I don't really feel like it. Why don't you go? I'll make some dinner. Or I would have said, oh, I feel a little tired. Whatever I would have said. And this time I was just like, no, I was like, I just don't want to do it, and I'm not going to do it. And so I'm getting a little more selfish about what feels good, what doesn't feel good. So I feel like we can, the way you said it, Lisa, too, in terms of reclaiming it because it's good for us. It aligns with my selfish side.
Yeah. Well, and I tell the Gen Zs, like, pleasure is vital. Self-pleasure is vital too.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're seeing this completely hockey stick of vibrators. You mentioned it in the beginning, Danielle, right? When we were younger, CVS, you couldn't go to CVS and see 6 different vibrators.
Definitely.
Right? It used to be not that long ago, less than 2% of women owned a vibrator, a tool or a toy. And today it's well over 70%. So that understanding of, hey, this is vital. These kids, I don't know, a lot of the stats are difficult to get, but they're not really good. It like Becoming Clitorate from Dr. Lori Mintz, she's awesome. She wrote that book. And the first time a Gen X had an orgasm on average was like 31. we're helping Gen Zs. No, you need to be able to have an orgasm, much sooner than that. Right.
Mhm.
And I think they are. Now, all of this data really relies heavily on self-reporting. And sometimes that's very skewed, and that's not what is really happening. One of the stats that we see often that conflicts with other data is that the Gen Z is having less sex. Well,
Mhm.
like to your point, Caitlin, sex is, penile vaginal insertion. Okay, maybe there's less of that, but now there's more oral. And we're seeing
Yeah.
an exacerbation in the STI rates that oral, that women are receiving and getting more STIs. So we know there's more happening. And the universities are saying, we're not seeing a slowdown in STIs whatsoever. So they're obviously doing something that's different from what they're, answering on these surveys as sex, right? Because still it's that mindset of, penile vaginal insertion. So, yeah.
I think too, it's interesting thinking about these generational differences as well. Of Danielle, I love when you said that you're working hard to say no more. But it was interesting to hear you use the word selfish around what's good for you. And that's so built into us, I think, especially as women in heterosexual relationships. Like, no matter how, I walk around wearing little vulvas in my ears, I'm extremely liberal and open, but I'm in a heterosexual relationship and I find myself, and my partner is very open and very not at all falling in gender roles. But I even find myself falling into these roles of like, this is what the woman does, this is what the man does. And this idea that we conceive of self-care as selfish is fascinating.
Yeah,
Not calling you
exactly.
out on it, just noting it myself. And I think one thing I've noticed as well, I'm a millennial, so I'm 37. So I'm kind of in this weird bridge gap or bridge
Joyous.
between Gen X and Gen
Then
Z.
why? Yeah.
And I find that there's certain things, yes, that compared to when in my 20s, I'm a lot bolder about saying this is what I need and this is what I don't. And I think that is really, really challenging to teach to a young person. I'm sure, Lisa, you encounter that. And some of it can't be taught. I think some of it is experience as well. But one of the blessings maybe of getting older as a woman is a little bit more confidence in ourselves and our ability to say no and talk about what we need and what works for us because of experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think my daughter nannied over the summer last year, and it was fascinating to hear the stories from the park. Every day they were at the park with the kids, right? And so she made a posse of friends that were all doing the same thing, and some were men.
Mhm.
And so, Gen X, Gen Y, maybe we would have thought, oh, wow, he's a stay-at-home dad. Oh, yeah, that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
her peers, it was just, oh,
No big
Joe's
deal.
going to be there too. Like it was the dads and the moms and the nannies. And it was all just one big melting pot, and nobody ostracized, nobody criticized. It wasn't anything different. It was so nice from her lens to hear this, that this roles, putting people in a role was not a thing. It wasn't,
Mhm.
he wasn't labeled, oh, or there were definitely more than one stay-at-home dad. It wasn't like that. It was just Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And I
beautiful to
thought that
see.
was so great. I thought that was
Mhm.
so different from, how I maybe would have thought it was, or what it was when I was younger.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the future, because regarding that selfish thing, Caitlin, it's funny, you mentioned it, and you're right. And even my husband was like, wow, you sound like you're being kind of selfish. And I actually was like, and I am. I am. Because I kind of was being a little bit of an ass about it, but that's neither here nor there. The bigger part for me, not so much in the gender roles, and this is why it'll be interesting to see how the future pans out, is a lot of the self-imposed selfishness, or the negating
Mhm.
something because I think it's selfish, came from caregiving. So I think I
Yeah.
maybe started off in a place where I was like, sometimes I gave, sometimes I got, and I was willing to
Mhm.
compromise, and you know, I was just a regular person, and I could decide what I wanted to do. And sometimes I would do something that I thought I would compromise. Then I went through 20 years where basically I helped facilitate the life of these people. And it, I recently wrote that I'm like, oh, you want to create people who can go do their own thing. And yet my 20-year-old was home from college this Christmas and was like, hey, mom, can you cut me an apple? And there I was cutting an apple. And I know I think I sent that to Alex. Alex, I think I texted you that over the holidays because it's like, it's so hard to pull back after being that person. I think the biggest shock is actually to them, my kids, when I'm like, I will not cut you. I just won't do it. I mean, sometimes I'm like, well, I'm in the kitchen. I mean, the knife is right here. It's so easy to put myself out, but it becomes your identity. And I think that sometimes when you think about sex as pleasure, any kind of pleasure becomes less a part of who you are when all you're doing is giving to other people. And Alex, how much of that do you see as one of the things people come in? Like, how often are women actually walking around? I know there are women who do this, and I'm not trying to make it just be a gender thing, but I feel like when you're in the caregiving role, and Lisa, you're talking about, seeing all these men doing this, and that is awesome. But when you're in that role and it becomes so habitual and you are the one who is making the doctor's appointments and literally physically caring for the people around you, you do, out of necessity, have to stop caring a little bit about yourself. I mean, you are possibly going to get the stomach bug if you're crawling around cleaning up someone else's sickness. Like,
but I think you are modeling self-care. You're going to the gym, you're healthy eating, you love your job. You're modeling that so that as they move on and out of the nest, at least in my opinion, they see that without this very severe gender role lens.
Totally.
And so, mom made the doctor's appointments just because somebody had to make the doctor's appointments. Like, I'm a single mom, so it's a little bit different for me. Like, if I don't do it, nobody's doing it, right? But I think that you're modeling that you love your job and you love helping. And I hope that then I believe that they see that and do that for themselves when they're out of the house. I want to eat healthy, so I'm going to go cut my own apple. Right? As opposed to that, like, well, mom was the mom, so mom had to do it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go find a wife that could do that. Like, I don't think that's
no, yeah. But I feel like, in the whole spectrum of things, when you're caring for somebody else, you've got all those things and you want to model all these things, but it's like, what's the first thing to go? And the first thing to go, the easiest thing to drop is your own pleasure. Because so how do you reprioritize that? Like, how do you say, okay, I'm back?
Well, I'm glad that you asked it that way, because what I really think is important is every 5 years, you need to completely recreate yourself because you're in a completely new stage of life. So, the needs of your children are very different from 0 to 5 than they are from 5 to 10, from 10 to 15, etc. And so if you're always having these, I almost call it like you're a CEO of your own life and you're having these like major business meetings with yourself and you re-update your life goals, your plans, what's realistic at this different juncture, you're able to shift the emotional labor that you're doing and where you're prioritizing your energy. Because we really do get into these habits that we started when the kids were first born. And what's great is once you have had your own meeting with yourself, you can then have like a co-meeting with your partner and update his or her plans with yours, and then really look at it together as to, should I still be doing all this emotional labor? Maybe I've gone back into the workforce and now I need you to take over some of this stuff. And again, it all comes down to communication and realizing we've got to continually change with life.
I love that. That's such a growth mindset.
I agree.
That's really
I'd love
cool.
to hop into and mention as well, like, that obviously the caregiving role, and especially for mothers, it is huge. And I cannot overstate how much that impacts my patients, and I'm sure yours, Alex's. And Alex, and so many women out there. And then there's also this category of folks like me that are child free by choice. And I think recognizing that society, I think, is it's becoming more accepted, but society often sees, especially women who are child free by choice, as selfish. Uh, and it's very common. I think it's again changing, but noting that it's rarely a selfish decision. There's a lot of things that go into that decision for many people, um, regardless of why someone is child free. Acknowledging that even if you're a child free person, you may still carry some of these ingrained societal expectations. I know I certainly do. And I feel like, well, if I don't empty the dishwasher, is it going to get emptied? That's what my mom did. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She did all these things. So therefore, I should do all these things, even though I have a more than full-time job and my partner does as well. And he's a grown man and can take care of himself. So even if we're not in a traditional caregiving role, it's very difficult for us to change the messages that we've been taught from childhood, which is if you have ovaries, these are your jobs. So continuing to sort of, I think Gen Z is doing a good job of breaking down a lot of those barriers, like you were talking about, Lisa, but acknowledging that in ourselves, of regardless of what kind of role we're in, we still might be carrying some of that baggage.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just in the DNA.
Totally. Oh, and how we're raised, right?
Yeah.
Hey everyone, I've got some exciting news. I'm partnering with LUWI, that's LUWI, a company that's reimagined women's health through the lens of the P word. Yep, pleasure. Because pleasure's a vital sign. It's not taboo, it's not indulgent, it's wellness. LUWI Lube is more than a silicone-based formula that skips the toxins and hormone disruptors. It's the start of a movement that puts wellness and pleasure first. Order LUWI Lube at getluwi.com, that's GETLUWI.com, and use code ROAR15, that's ROAR15, for a special discount at checkout. I just want to tell you guys, I'm sorry, this is like an aside and has not, well, it has everything to do with what we're talking about. But last night, my husband, I was working on something all day. I was working on the taxes, which I absolutely hate. And it's like the bane of my existence. And I was like, and every time he tried to talk to me, I was like, I cannot break concentration because I'll be totally lost. And he was cleaning the microwave. As he's
I love him.
So we're in the same room. I'm in the kitchen. He's at the microwave. And I'm just like silently like trying to find all these receipts and doing all this stuff that I hate and so hate. I hate it. I hate it. It's the worst part of my life. I can't model any good behavior when it comes to it because I hate it. And he's cleaning the microwave. And as he's going, and it was overdue. And he's like, I just cannot believe that it doesn't occur to you to clean it. And I'm like, oh, it's occurred to me. I was like, it occurred to me many times. Sure. I'm just not going to do it. And he's like, this is disgusting. And he's like, why is it always me? And I was like, it's always you, because if I take that on, then that's just one more thing. And he was away this past weekend during this snowstorm, and we had a blizzard here in New Jersey. And so I had to do the things that typically, whether it's gender or just pure laziness on my part, he has done. And one of the things that I think that I have done, Alex, is in my own role as like CEO of my life, is like a couple of years ago, I was like, I will not learn a single thing. I was like, and if I don't know how to do it, I just can't do it. So we got a boat, and my husband's always like, let's go on the boat. We got to clean the boat. We got to do this. And I'm like, no, I will only ride the boat. I will not help you. I was like, I will not help you clean it. I don't tie it up. I don't know anything about it, because if I do, somehow that's going to end up on my plate. So one of the devastating things that's happened this weekend is that I learned how to use the generator. And even though I want to know, because I should know, right? I'm an adult lady who can take care of herself. Now I know the next storm that comes around, I will. My role can expand. So there's always being that CEO of self. But sorry for going into that. I don't even know why. I just felt like I had to share the story about the microwave. But again, I do feel, and I don't know if this is a gender thing, but I do feel that the men I talk to, and it is significantly less than the women that I talk to, but the men that I talk to have no problem prioritizing pleasure for themselves. Like they're really good about being like, oh, you know what? I need to put the mask on myself and take care of myself. It's part of their self-care. They recognize that pleasure is part of their self-care. Whereas for women that I talk to, it seems like pleasure is an afterthought. Alex, what were you going to say about it?
You just tapped into something so important, which is when women, quote, don't know how to do something, men will step in, and I'm using traditional male-female roles. So really what you're talking about is like if women sort of stop doing all the caretaking for the children, the men will step in. It's just you need to have that space. Like when you get a divorce, you'll typically see men suddenly doing a lot more emotional labor. They're going to do the cooking. They're going to start planning and prioritizing. And so some of this is like sidestepping and creating the shift for your partner to fill that space and trusting that it's okay to take care of yourself. It's just that a lot of times we put so much pressure on ourselves and saying, well, if I don't do this, nobody else will. And the reality is sometimes that's accurate and sometimes that's not.
Yes, that's a good point, Alex. And I said that earlier, if I don't do it, nobody else will. And that's actually not true for right now. My kids and I are moving into this new place. They are making the doctor. My son recently over the holidays, he made an appointment at the urgent care for himself. And it was really great. Now, I took him and sat in the lobby while he went in for the sinus infection meeting or appointment, but he did it. And so, yeah, you're right. Because I didn't do it. I thought, well, if you're really, I don't know how sick you are. You're telling me you're sick. I don't know how sick you are. And if it got so bad that he did it, clearly. And I think that's great. And I think that's what happens in change. Like no revolution ever happened because things were like, it's okay. No, it was so bad that then there was a revolution, right? So when things get so bad, I think that's when change is easy. It's like a luxury of bad, right? It's the massive silver lining of bad, chaotic crisis things. You have to make a change. You have to shift. You have to make a decision.
That's why I feel like that CEO, that 5-year CEO thing is great guidance. Because I feel like it's even just in this conversation, we're like, oh, we're shifting and that's great. I want to get back to one of the things you guys all mentioned too, is that sometimes one of the things to increase pleasure, have a better sex life, etc., if it's not self-arousal and you're with a partner, is the conversation. So sometimes those conversations can get awkward. Not everybody is versed in that. Not everybody is comfortable having these kinds of conversations. It's funny. Very recently, I was with a bunch of college girls. I'll not say anybody's names, but if they're listening, they're going to know. And one of the girls who grew up like in a very like Boston area, big Catholic family, no sex discussion, no idea, like went to college and was like, fill me in, people. Well, she had a roommate, another girlfriend of ours who was very sexually literate and, had a long-term boyfriend. And like the one girl said that she'd walk in and she was like, oh, like, I'm so sorry. And she was like, wait, why is he tied up? Like you can do it that way too. So, like conversations that we maybe aren't used to having. How do you start that? And anybody can answer. How do women who haven't had those conversations start them?
Naturally, right? I mean, you're watching a movie and you can start talking about it. You can read a book together and talk about it. You can talk about something you read in the newspaper. You can talk about the Epstein files, right? I mean, there's anything. There's so much sex around us that's a great way to start the conversation because it's not personal. You're not talking about yourself, but you're getting the topic going. And then from there, you can say to someone, well, what's your personal opinion? How does that feel? How does that relate to us?
Yeah, I think, I don't know how you feel about this, Alex, another sex therapist that I worked with often said, a good time to talk about, well, anytime's a good time to talk about sex with your partner, but sometimes talking about it in the moment is really tricky when you're already sort of starting to engage in sex or getting frustrated, but separating it and having that conversation over breakfast at a separate time that feels less emotionally charged can be helpful too. If you are getting personal, your example is more, like you said, depersonalized. But if you are talking about your personal experience and your experience with your partner, sometimes it's good to bring it outside the bedroom into somewhere that feels very neutral, as a safe starting point that feels less charged.
I get this question a lot with parents saying, how do you talk to your kids?
Oh,
yeah.
And, you talk to your kids, and when you feel the most connected to your kids, whatever you're talking about, that's the best time. Because that all you're trying to do is just add a new category to that connected dialogue. And a lot of them say, well, I should ask them at this time. Well, you're not connected. You're not having a conversation about something else. Do it when you're having a conversation about something else and you guys are feeling connected. Maybe you are laughing about something. It's easy. That's when you add it in, and just keep your eyebrows from raising. Right?
Just a neutral face.
Neutral face. When you're already talking to your kid about something that they're interested in, that's a good time to bring it up. It's easy. And don't be surprised. And, well, we need to talk. Don't make it a big thing. Anything that's going to be, well, we need to talk about this it's going to put up the barriers right away.
Mm-hmm.
To add on to that, I would encourage people to try having these intimate conversations either before sex, during sex, after sex, at all different random times, because everybody's an individual and you really don't know how the other person's going to respond best. Some people feel the most safe after you've had good sex. Some people feel the most safe right before sex. Some people feel the best or confident during. So try lots of different ways and take mental notes and see what works and then replicate it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I tell my parents that, not my parents, but, parents of kids who ask me this, when do your kids go to the grocery store with you? Then when you're at the grocery store, you got the backdrop of these other things. And, if you're next to each other, or you're then going into the car and you're loading the bags, that's a good time. It's easy. It's light. There's no intensity. You're going to the grocery store. They're relaxed, right? I don't know. Those are the suggestions.
I always feel like it's car rides. Long car rides are like the best for any kind of conversation. I can actually remember one long car ride where I got in the car with my husband. I think it was a family trip, and I was like so furious with him. I could not possibly remember what it was about. But by the end of the car ride, I was like, well, I actually still really like you. But I was like, you can have those kind of low expectation conversations that turn into something more so often. I don't want to keep you guys any longer because you've been awesome with your time. But just one last question before I let you all go. Is there anything that you wish women knew sooner, or that you wanted to share with the women listening that I didn't talk about, that we didn't get into? Caitlin, you want to start?
Come back to me. I'm thinking.
No pressure. Lisa,
mine might be kind of specific to running this business, but what I wish I knew a while ago was how little funding is allocated to women founders. And that is not just in the venture space, which is obviously where I am, but the largest funder in the United States, NIH, allocates just under 1% of their entire budget to women's health, and a tiny fraction of that, less than 1%, to reproductive health. 170 million women. That is just absolutely bananas. There isn't a word that actually accurately describes what that is. And I so wish I had known that well before starting this journey. I'm not quite sure how I would have done anything differently, but knowing it would have been a better way to set up my expectations for how long this would take and the challenges that I would face. Right. Because, I played soccer in college. I did whatever I wanted to do. I didn't think there were any limitations. I thought, honestly, I believed I could do anything I set my mind to. And I was not prepared for that big cinder block wall ahead of me that systematically blocks women from being able to do what they want to do in this situation. So that's what I wish I had known sooner, and I hope, knowing it now, that everybody knows it now, that it's on its way to shifting. But
I feel like I have so much to respond to that I'm not going to at all, because my one pull away for our audience is that we have to keep showing up and we have to keep talking and having these conversations, because if we don't do, talk about if we don't do it, no one will. Really, no one will. So this isn't our personal thing. This is every woman has to know these things, because I think a lot of us, especially at this age, were raised with the idea that we could be or do anything. And we've been like, really shocked and stunned that society has not kept up their end of the bargain. Because I remember thinking even about women presidents, like, of course there would be a women now I'm like, well, I hope so. But I assumed we'd be on like our second or third one by now.
Yeah.
And, anyway, Alex, anything you want to last takeaway that I didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about, that you were like, we're talking about this and we didn't do?
I just want to add that I think women still can do it all. You can't do everything well, but you can do one thing extraordinarily well. And the cost might be high to get there, but you have to dream it and you have to believe in it and you have to be willing to get yourself back up there and keep trying and pushing yourself forward, because you're your own boss and you're unstoppable.
Mm.
I love that too, because I think that we have to keep believing it. We have to have a message of hope, because the reality is really difficult. And if we're not pushing ourselves forward, what do we got? So thank you guys. Caitlin, I'm back to you.
Lisa and Alex, you set me up perfectly for exactly what I was thinking, because it was almost like opposite sides of the same coin. And I'm with you, Lisa. I also work extensively in the startup space, and I'm constantly frustrated by the lack of funding and acknowledgement and options for female founders and for women in general trying to solve their own problems in their health or other parts of their life. But I also agree with Alex, too, that there is, as frustrated as I get, I felt you, Danielle, and I was like, oh, I just want to say all the things when Lisa said this. As frustrated as I feel, I have to step back as well and say, okay, what do I do with this information?
Mm-hmm.
The system wasn't built for me. How do I keep fighting? How do I keep showing up for myself? And reminding listeners as well that the medical system, too, was not really built for female bodies. We're getting better, but we still have to advocate for ourselves, because a lot of the research and the data was almost exclusively performed on male bodies. And we are fighting to change that. And we are showing up to try to bring more data into women's specific conditions and how women are different from men or from even non-binary folks. There's a whole spectrum. But continuing to advocate for ourselves and not taking no for an answer when you know that something is not right in your body, in your mind, whatever it is. It's very easy to fall down a rabbit hole when you're being told, oh, it's normal, sweetie. Just have a glass of wine. Oh, you're fine. This is part of getting older. When you're hearing all these messages, I just really encourage people to stay in what you know in your own body and keep looking for answers. Maybe talk to someone else. Maybe get another opinion, because the more we learn about female bodies, the more we'll be able to better care for them. And there are people out there that will listen and will help and actually advocate for you if you advocate for yourself.
And Gen Z, I love that too, Caitlin. It reminded me of a headline I read the other day. My daughter's in Spain right now, and so I keep up on what's going on. And there was a woman judge in Barcelona that made headlines for a decision. Her decision was to enable the injuries that a woman sustained in a car accident to be covered by insurance, or she was denied by insurance. And the insurance, the reason for the denial was that her injuries couldn't possibly have come from the car crash because it was inconsistent with their actuarial data, which was based on a male body. I don't know if you guys read this. And so I was like, yes, wow, this is great. And I said to my daughter, sweetie, look at the headlines in Barca. This woman judge, justice prevailed, and the white men of the insurance industry were schooled, and this is great. And her response, oh, yeah, well, that should have happened. Like it was an expectation. And I thought, okay, yeah, gosh.
And she's right.
She's right. She's right. Here I am like, woohoo. And she's like, duh, Mom. So maybe that is growing in other areas that, duh, yes, this is how it should be. Anyway.
Absolutely. You guys, ladies, thank you so much for being here. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time and your expertise and your willingness to have awkward conversations with me. You are all the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, everybody.
I'm so grateful to this group for having such an honest, funny, and frankly refreshing conversation about the things so many of us were never really taught and sometimes still don't know how to talk about. I keep thinking about how much easier so many things would be if conversations like this weren't the exception but the norm. And next week, we're continuing that thread in a different way. We're talking about the assumptions that get made about women, especially in places like education, and what it looks like to challenge them, question them, and maybe rewrite them entirely with Rebecca Pierce. If this episode seemed like something you might have had with your best girlfriends, share it with them. That's how these conversations keep going. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on Roar.